Hello and welcome to the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast. I'm your host Matthew Pejkovic and this is episode number 234. Out now on DVD and digital is the VelociPastor, a tongue-in-cheek horror thriller unlike anything you've ever seen, in which its main character, a Catholic priest, is cursed with the ability to transform into a flesh-eating dinosaur. A bloody, funny, positively ridiculous yet surprisingly sincere, sure to be cult classic, The VelociPastor is recommended fun for those who love grindhouse-style exploitation cinema with a heart. Joining me now to talk about the film is the film's writer and director, Brendan Steere. Brendan, I thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you very much for having me.
So, I was doing a bunch of research, listening to some previous interviews of yours, and the origins of the film, or at least the spark for the idea, was really interesting because essentially the idea for the VelociPastor is that it was a typo. Is this correct?
That is very correct, yes. An autocorrect, in fact.
How does an autocorrect lead to a movie?
Good question. I think that you just kind of got to be open to inspiration striking from anywhere, you know? Especially when you're just in the very beginning stages of when you're thinking about doing a movie. It truly can be anything. It can be the shape of a building that, like, inspires you, and you're sort of it sparks your imagination, and you start thinking, like, what could be in that building? What could they do there? You know, stories can come from anywhere. So I think it's funny that, you know, the VelociPastor has been quite successful in the press, and I think that it's ironic in some ways that it started with something so haphazard and human and small as a mistake. And it's sort of like, I don't know, you just got to be open to finding that spark wherever it may be, whether that's in a lyric of a song or you know, just a conversation you're having with somebody, or your phone messing up. So I think you've just got to be open to that stuff coming from anywhere.
I just want to touch on the pastor part of the VelociPastor. I mean, when you talk about holy men or pastors or what have you, especially in the Christian context of things, there's many different denominations you can touch into, and they can take you down different paths as well. In the case of your film, your main character is a Catholic priest, and I'm curious as to why you chose the Catholic religion to look at as your main character as opposed to another religion. I know you touched on I think Catholicism before with a short film called Confession from several years back. Was the remnants from that something that still stuck with you, and that's why you continue on down that road? Well, what was the decision to stick with this denomination as opposed to others?
Yeah, I am not Catholic. I'm not Christian whatsoever. I don't have a faith. But I've always been interested in Catholicism in specific because the narrative that they view their faith through is very self-punitive. It's like the whole the emphasis of Catholicism is sort of life is suffering, we are all bad people, and you can basically only do very small things to, like, maybe kind of redeem yourself. And I always just thought that was an interesting conflicted place for a character to be, that they have already in their brains kind of failed or are kind of bad people. I think it just leads to a lot more, in some ways, self-reflection. It's like, you know, a lot of the greatest religious films of all time are from Catholic filmmakers. Something like Silence is an incredible film, and I've always been interested in that, I guess that even though I am not a person of faith, you understand what it's like to believe in something, and believe in something so strongly that when something comes along to question that, it's traumatic. And, like, it's something worth making a film about. At the end of the day, it's just a metaphor for how you define yourself, what your beliefs are. And, like, Doug defines himself as being a good person in a certain way, and by the end of the movie, he defines himself as being a good person in a completely different way. And it's that is essentially his journey. And I just think it's really, people of faith, that journey is very what's the word? Apparent. It's very obvious because it's sort of something that they are defining themselves through, especially a priest.
I'm a Catholic myself, a practicing Catholic, and I always found that when it came to Catholicism and movies, that the religion lends itself well because of the visual aspects as well.
Yes, absolutely agree.
And especially like when you look at classic horror films, like say the classic Hammer horror stuff, or maybe the Universal stuff, especially vampire films, werewolf films. And I find the VelociPastor to be like a riff on like the classic kind of werewolf movie itself.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I kind of see where you're coming from, but I think there's that visual element to it as well. In fact, I've kind of coined a phrase, a term in my reviews in regards to some of these films that blends the two worlds, and I call it Catholicism, because it kind of touches on that stuff and it kind of just twists it a bit to suit the narrative of the film and the look of it as well.
Right.
I just wanted to move on now to... This isn't the first time you put the VelociPastor on screen. You had a trailer in 2011. This was a project for film school that you were doing at the time?
Yes, it was.
And when you see the success of that idea, especially since it kind of went viral, I think at the time you had like 50,000 views on this short film / trailer. Is that when the kind of spark hits, like, you know what, we can really flesh this out and do something with it?
Yes. Well, at the very least, it was the first thing I made where it found an audience. And it was kind of... It sounds self-serving, but, you know, as a filmmaker, part of doing your art is people have to see it. Like, you can make the greatest film of all time, but if nobody sees it, you kind of didn't, you know? And so I don't think it is necessarily self-serving or cynical to chase an audience to an extent. And so I very much realized that there was an audience for this material, and they were interested in it. And I wanted to chase down what interested them and me about it, because it wouldn't go away from my head either. I just kept sort of turning it over and thinking about what I would do with a feature-length VelociPastor more and more and more. And so after a certain time, even though the only other film I had made was like a very serious horror film, so this was a strange career move, but I was just like, it's undeniable. There's something in me that wants to tell this story, and I'm not being true to myself legitimately as an artist by not pursuing it.
I talk to a lot of independent filmmakers, and a lot of them talk to me about their experiences with crowdfunding. Kickstarter, Indiegogo, all sorts of crowdfunding platforms. You yourself attempted a couple of times to raise some funds. It didn't work out for yourself, so you went to a private investor who pretty much put up the bulk of the funds for you. The crowdfunding part of it for you, considering the interest you had for the trailer and such, when you go down the crowdfunding road and you find that interest isn't there financially, do you think it came down to just the fact that the idea, the merging of, you know, two very distinct, different type of horror genres, and one's kind of like that dinosaur prehistoric thing, another one's kind of like a werewolf riff? It just maybe didn't, the idea of it just didn't work with people enough to want to put their hard-earned on the table?
I think that there are certain pieces of art that people don't know they want until they exist. Right. And I think that was the central problem with something like VelociPastor, is just that, like, crowdfunding it, I mean, is that people wanted it, but they weren't sure what it would be. Like they weren't sure if this was going to be like sort of a broad trauma-esque gross out comedy. They didn't know if this was going to be a Sharknado kind of thing, a sincere attempt to make a low budget creature feature. I think they were a little just confused tonally, and because it wasn't as specific as it should have been, they didn't want to pay for it. So it's, I think it's funny that a lot of the press about the film overall has been like, oh shit, it's good. And I think that that's pretty indicative of maybe why people wouldn't want to fund it, because they just were not sure if it would be a good investment of their money. And yeah, I think that there's something to the fact that There's a big difference in asking somebody to watch your completed film and essentially asking somebody to believe in a film that has not yet been made. And it just didn't work out for us this time. I'm not a fan of crowdfunding in general, I must say. I just find it very stressful and just not what I'm good at. I'm good at making movies, not getting money for them.
So you have your initial idea, you have your first character, you have your funding. Now you need to flesh out your world, and you inhabit your world with different sorts of characters that some of them just come from like way from left field. So on one hand, you have kind of like your prostitute love interest, which kind of suits the kind of thing we like with the of opposing forces. On one hand, a Catholic priest, one hand, a prostitute. Okay, that's fine. Of course, from a prostitute, you got a pimp. So you got one pimp named, and I love the name Frankie fucking Mermaid. I think it's just fantastic. And then out of nowhere, you got ninjas. And not only ninjas, and I don't want to give away plot details, but ninjas with a very specific kind of motivation behind them, which you wouldn't see coming from any kind of any way whatsoever. Where do you grab these elements from, especially the ninjas part? Is that just a fact that you just like, fuck it, I got a dinosaur, let's put some ninjas in here as well?
That's not entirely far off. I was trying to, because you're doing an interesting thing. Not only are you doing a riff on the werewolf genre and, like you said, the sort of Catholicism stuff, but you're also just sort of riffing on low budget movies, period. And like that sort of exploitation subgenre. And one of the tenets of those is they always go for like these big, loud plot points. Like if it's something that you can't shout about, it should not be in your movie. And it was a marketing scheme for them. And so the ninjas to me were sort of riffing on that. Like, of course there's ninjas in this movie. Because why wouldn't there be? Because we need something extreme to catch attention because it's a low budget movie. And I will also say, honestly, the ninjas I went for just because I thought they sounded the most fun. I had seen this movie called Miami Connection, which is just essential viewing, in my opinion. I love that movie. And it presents ninjas as being part of its world so gleefully and with so little explanation. Like it's not, they don't, why are there ninjas in Miami? And the film is not concerned with that. The film is just sort of like, yes, of course there are ninjas in Miami next. And it just keeps moving forward. And I wanted to sort of emulate that, the guts it took to do that, to just sort of be like, yep, ninjas, anyway, and just keep plowing forward.
The thing that really took me by surprise with your movie is that, yes, you were going for a tone. You wanted to be purposefully schlocky, exploitative, kind of like that grindhouse thing that really kind of kicked off again 10 years ago when Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez did their double feature. But there's also a sincerity to it as well. And it wasn't kind of like in that kind of unintentional kind of way. Like you talk about Miami Connection, that movie was made for all intents and purposes to be a serious movie. That's what makes it such a bad film, because it's just way off the mark of where the person's going. And something like Sharknado you touched on before, that was made with the intention of purposely being a bad movie. I mean, the premise itself just lends itself to that. But your film, when I watched it, there are parts in it that really surprised me. And I'm going to use, for example, you have a sex scene in the movie. Now, you could have gone in an exploitation road and made something really kind of tasteless or what have you, but it didn't come out that way. There's a sincerity between the characters and the way it was edited. And then you had the music on top of it as well. There's this really great song on top of it, really catchy, really had emotion behind it as well. And I want to just touch on the music a little later. And I just want to talk about, like, just let's use the sex scene for example. You could have done something totally different. You could have done something really dirty or tacky, but you didn't. The decision not to, the decision to really touch into the relationship that these two characters had. Granted, they're in a movie that's an exploitation film, that's a schlocky exploitation film, a low-budget film, but it seemed to me you really want to touch on, hey, this is a love story. These characters are in love, and it's gonna help because we're gonna put some stakes in this story.
Yes. Well, I'm so happy that you sort of touched on that. So it's two thoughts. First and foremost is sort of at large, the entirety of the movie. When people talk about good, bad movies, a subject I have spent a large portion of my life thinking about now, I think why we love watching these films is the sincerity behind them. Like, The Room is so sincere. It is so almost like there's no cynicism to it. He's not trying to make a bad movie. He's sincerely trying to make a great film. And I think to an extent with VelociPastor that was true. And I wanted to, I knew that genuinely I had to be sincere in wanting this to be good, and I did. And we do that partially through Doug and Carol's relationship, because my worry is that in a lot of movies, like a Sharknado, where it's coming more from a place of cynicism or sort of a vaguely cruel place, like sort of like a fuck these movies kind of place, I wanted to portray how much I genuinely loved these films and how I really respected that artists, regardless of how inept they were, did something kind of courageous and really put themselves out there and put a dream out there. That's why watching them fail is satisfying, because in fact they are succeeding. It's just that they are succeeding in displaying a very strange vision of the world. And so with Doug and Carol's Romance, I wanted to make it real. I wanted to make actual stakes be there, like you said, because my thought was not to just keep using this specific movie as a punching bag, but in something like a Sharknado, like, you don't really care about the characters because the movie doesn't care about the characters.
Yeah.
And after a certain point, it just kind of becomes boring. Like, yes, it's silly, and yeah, there is some surface stuff to get from it, from that sense, but I don't really care about Ian Ziering. I don't even remember his character's name. I remember him as the actor. And I wanted to avoid that. My thought was that VelociPastor is so sort of ludicrously bizarre that the audience would need some real emotion to connect to. No matter how small, they needed some sense of reality to follow these characters through to the end and hopefully learn to empathize with and care about them. So whenever I was approaching Doug and Carol's romantic moments, they had to play in my brain as sincere and real. Because also in a weird sense, it's me showing how much I really do love these quote-unquote bad movies. And also, I knew that for VelociPastor to succeed as a bad film, I needed to have real emotion in it. I needed to have something I cared about. And so, yeah, when it came time to doing the sex scene, that was very much the intention. I will also say, this isn't as cool to say, but from a self-conscious place, the sex scene in specific, I was a little concerned making the VelociPastor that people would just sort of assume we were bad. Like, They might not be in on the joke enough, and they might just think that we just had no idea what we were doing. And so I knew there had to be one scene in the movie that we just made the hell out of, and it would sort of recontextualize everything you saw earlier and afterwards as very much intentional, because we knew what we were doing here, so ergo. But yeah, that was that's how I went about it.
The music itself, you got some really great tracks here. Rock kind of, punk kind of style music here. Really catchy, really kind of grabs you. Music that to me feels like you could listen to this stuff kind of like on a compilation or a radio. It doesn't necessarily isn't tied to the film, but works well with the film. I know you have a band yourself. Was it your band provided most of the music for this film? Talk us through where you got the music from and whether any possibility of a streaming channel or a soundtrack will come from this.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Yeah, my band did the opening theme, Extinction Love, which plays over the opening credits. So this is actually the second movie in a row where I had to substitute a piece of my own music because we didn't get the rights to the music that was originally there. The movie originally opened with this kind of like really cheesy 1970s song recorded by actor Chad Everett called Jesus Hammer. And you can still hear it in some of the uploads of the trailer early on before we went to Wild Eye distribution. We just couldn't get the rights to it. And so I ended up just writing a song and we put it in the movie. I had actually written the song beforehand as backup in case it came to this, because it was the one, Jesus Hammer was the one song that I was afraid that we wouldn't get the rights to, and I was correct. So yeah, we do the opening credits song, my band Free Parking. The rest of the songs in the movie are by two bands. This Philadelphia punk band called The Holy Mess, which is run by the brother of one of the members of my band, and this other band called Math the Band, who does the sex scene montage music. All this music existed beforehand, and I knew the decision to sort of go with a punk alt soundtrack descended from this anime called FLCL, which I really adore. And one of the most striking things about FLCL is that the entire score, there's not even incidental music that is not done by this Japanese alt-rock band, The Pillows. They kind of sound like a punkier Weezer. They're great. And like, it was just the decision to not do a traditional score in FLCL makes it feel so alive and so kind of vital, and it's just so different. And I read an interview with the director, and he was like, I don't know, I basically just put in a bunch of music I liked because I was hoping that my love for this music would sort of like transfer into the series. And I kind of approached the music in VelociPastor with the same mentality. Like, I didn't want to put a song in the movie that I just didn't love, that I also didn't love as a song. So a lot of these, I don't want to say they were found in editing, because that I was thinking about them throughout all of filming, but it definitely, I was just listening to this kind of music a lot on the actual filming, because I knew it was kind of a scrappy punk rock film.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the budget was $35,000. It's nothing. And so I thought that maybe the ethos of those kind of low to no budget punk rock songs would somehow just sort of thematically be on point. Also, and like I said, most importantly, I wanted them to be bitchin' songs. Like, just ones that I listen to them all the time still, just because I love the music. In terms of releasing an official soundtrack, I would like to. I don't know if we'll be able to quite negotiate all of the different rights to it, but I can absolutely assure you that we can make a playlist for it. All of the songs exist on Spotify, so you can do it, viewers. The power is in your hands.
I hope so, because it's a great collection of songs, and very much the tone and the genre of the music very much, I think, just couples very well with the spirit of the movie, which is that kind of like, working class, low budget kind of filmmaking, which really just, it all just blends so well.
Yeah, and not apologizing for it.
Exactly.
Like both the music and the movie are like, yeah, we were made by like 10 people. Get with it. And I'm with you. I really liked that. I thought that sort of spiritually almost they married together well.
They do, and it's something that really kind of like caught me by surprise. This is a movie, and it's something I've said throughout the interview. It really does catch me by surprise in many ways, and it's a credit to you that it does.
Thank you.
Final question: Halloween's around the corner. What's the hopes you're going to see some VelociPastor costumes out there?
It would be my genuine dream come true. I've been telling people that I have been saying this for years, even before VelociPastor. I don't want to say no, I've made it, but I will be personally incredibly fulfilled when I see either a cosplay of something I've made or read a fan fiction of it. So if anybody wants to write a Doug Frankie Mermaid /fic, it will also achieve the same thing for me. But I would love to see some Frankie Mermaids out there this Halloween. I think that it would just be... It would really underline to me that how much people love the movie, and that's really, at the end of the day, what you want. You want people to react to your art. And so far, they have just been doing so much more than I had expected, in the best way possible.
So for everyone out there, the VelociPastor is out there for people to watch on DVD and digital as well. It's all over. You can find them all over Facebook, Twitter. Is that right, Brendan? You can find all your information there.
Yep. And Instagram.
And Instagram as well. So be sure to watch it. Watch it with an open mind and an open heart, and I guarantee you will be surprised with the results there. And Brendan, I thank you very much. Congratulations to you. I mean, from humble beginnings of a typo to a $35,000 budget to what I really consider to be a low budget kind of phenomenon, because, you know, I don't think people really understand what it takes to make a film, even like a small budget movie. It takes a lot of guts and a lot of heart for it to happen, no matter the context of the film. And I think you really did a great job here. And I imagine by now you will have made your money back alone, just with distribution and such. And I'm really interested to see what you're going to do with the rest of your career. And hopefully we can talk in the future when other projects pop up.
Yeah, I'd love that. Thank you so much. I really mean it.